Good evening to those bored enough to watch. Five Nights at Freddy's is a series of games that I've extensively invested my time into over the years, but one aspect of it that I've never particularly been invested in is the thousands of fan games that have released over the years. Especially in the modern era of the franchise, more attention has been directed to some of these projects, and while I haven't played a lot of them, I've played some, which I found myself greatly enjoying, and in this video, I want to discuss some of them and why I would recommend them to you. So, with that said, let's discuss Five Nights at Freddy's fan games. The Return to Bloody Nights is, in my opinion, a great fan game that offers an addictive, engaging, and fun experience that I always enjoy whenever I replay it. The game contains 5 animatronics, including Fredbear, Fredbear 2.0, Spring Bonnie 2.0, and the Puppet. Throughout the nights within the game, you need to counter them as they arrive at your office while also managing the amount of heat produced by your generator. If it reaches its maximum, then you won't be able to close any doors until the meter empties, which can make you susceptible to being jump scared by animatronics. Fredbear and Spring Bonnie act in the same way that Bonnie and Chica do in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. They roam the pizzeria and gradually arrive at your office. A directional sound cue will play when they're at your door, in which you have a small amount of time to close it before being jump scared. The way to tell when they've left is via a knocking sound at the door they were at. Fredbear 2.0 is an animatronic that you'll need to listen out for. You can hear his distorted voice at your door, and eventually you'll be able to see him there too. Unlike the other animatronics, he'll linger at your door for a bit before actually trying to jump scare you, unlike the others who give you very little time or none at all before attacking. This means that with Fredbear 2.0, it's always a good idea to wait for a bit before closing your door in his face, as doing so immediately upon his arrival will cause heat to generate unnecessarily. Spring Bonnie 2.0 functions similarly to Foxy in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. You can first see him in the parts and service room, where he'll gradually make his way out to the right hall, eventually being right in front of the camera with his hands covering his face. When he uncovers it, he'll immediately run to your office, which gives you a very small amount of time to close the door before he attacks you. If successfully countered, he'll bang at your door before leaving. Spring Bonnie 2.0 and Fredbear 2.0 are direct parallels to one another, which makes them quite interesting characters to play against in a mechanical sense, in my opinion. Both will slowly make their way to you in phases, but one will linger at your door before attacking, and the other will immediately make a dash for your office. The last animatronic is the Puppet, who is situated behind you in the office. Throughout the night, you need to periodically check behind you and use your flashlight to send him back to his box. I really enjoyed the gameplay, as I think that it does a good job providing a continually engaging experience by ensuring that you're never truly safe. For example, you can't rely solely on the cameras to see where the animatronics are, as Fredbear 2.0 doesn't appear in any of them to my knowledge, and instead you'll need to listen out and check for him at your door. However, you can't entirely ignore the cameras, as you need to check for Spring Bonnie 2.0, who indicates when he'll attack via them. The game extends this idea to your own office too, where there's the continual threat of the Puppet lurking behind you at all times. One thing about the game that I've always enjoyed is the story and how it does a masterful job at presenting the breakdown of the friendship between Henry, Emily, and William Afton. It does an exceptional job at portraying William's gradual descent into madness, as well as his jealousy towards Henry for his peaceful life, whereas Williams is tainted by things such as the death of his daughter and the stress of divorce proceedings. I also enjoy the other smaller implications, such as the fact that the player character is actually the phone guy from the first 2 official Five Nights at Freddy's games. One criticism I personally have of the story is the dialogue. For the most part, it does a good job at presenting William's downfall and his tendencies to push Henry away in times of stress, as opposed to embracing his help, which eventually culminates into his jealousy. It also does a good job at showing Henry's compassionate nature towards William and his willingness to help and be patient with him. However, I think that there are points in the dialogue between the two where the game, in an attempt to show Henry's kind-hearted nature, ends up giving the impression that he's whining by having him say the same thing over and over. Overall, I think that the Return to Bloody Nights holds up incredibly well with its engaging and addictive gameplay, which is easy to learn and hard to master. It makes the game easy to pick up but hard to put down, which is an aspect of these games that I've always enjoyed. Hence, if you're looking for a fan game that provides an engaging, fun, and addictive experience that tells an interesting and great story, then I would recommend the Return to Bloody Nights. A Bite at Freddy's is a smaller game that takes place over the course of 3 courses, which occur in a single night. In order to complete the courses, you need to wait for your manager to prepare and send food to 3 different locations within the pizzeria via the conveyor, which you will then need to confirm its arrival via the camera. In between these courses, you'll need to do a short mini game which can involve minuscule tasks like replacing a light bulb, or more engaging ones such as needing to replace screws within the conveyor, while also keeping the animatronics away from you by closing a gate whenever you see them. I enjoyed these smaller sections of the game that divert from the the main structure. They do a good job at breaking up the courses and also providing a sense of variety in the gameplay. One thing that I appreciate about the game is that the animatronics have a baseline mechanic of being able to enter the conveyor. However, all of them have a unique mechanic to call their own alongside that. This means that you always need to keep a consistent watch over the camera for any animatronics trying to enter the conveyor, while also checking for any of them in the office or if they're trying to enter through means specific to them. It adds a level of intensity to the game as you need to manage multiple things at once, which is an aspect of the game that I was quite fond of. Bonnie can directly enter your office, and when he does, you need to find where he's hiding within and turn off the power. After doing so, you need to wait for him to leave before turning on the power again. Chica will appear directly in front of you within the office. When you spot her, you need to draw the toy gun seen on the desk and shoot her in between the eyes. After doing so successfully, she'll leave you alone. Freddy will enter the vent on camera 6, which is directly connected to your office. You need to wait until you see him in that respective camera before enabling the fan, which will cause him to go away. It's always a good idea to deal with him immediately, as if you enable the fan when he's closer to the camera, you'll slice his head off, which will result in a jump scare. Foxy is an animatronic who will go to the parts in service in an attempt to hinder the wiring. On the cameras, you'll slowly watch him inch closer to the wires before trying to chew on them. In order to rid him of the wires, you need to reset the cameras when you see him chewing on the wires, which will cause him to leave. After beating the main 3 courses, you'll unlock a 4th and final course, which sees every animatronic arriving at your office more frequently, and also introduce a new animatronic by the name of Threadbare, who replicates the behavior of Freddy and Foxy, but not Bonnie and Chica. In addition to this, he'll hinder your conveyors by jamming himself into them. When this happens, you need to turn them off and wait for them to become usable again. I don't really feel the need to discuss any story elements with this game, mostly because it doesn't really have one, which is something I don't have an issue with. Overall, I would recommend A Bite at Freddy's for those who are looking for a fun and engaging experience in a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game. Fredbear's Fright is a game that I also enjoy returning to from time to time. It has some unique mechanics which allow the game to have some variety, which is an element that I find myself appreciating. The game takes place over the course of 5 nights, with 4 of them being within the office, and the 5th being inside of an animatronic suit. In the main 4 nights of the game, you'll have to contend with 6 animatronics. Dismantled Fredbear will enter your office, and when you see him standing in your office, you'll need to use the sprinkler to ward him off. It's worth noting that you need to be careful with how long you have the water on for, as using it unnecessarily could cause you to run out. Dismantled Spring Bonnie will gradually make his way to and enter the vent connected to your office. When you hear the sound of the vents banging, you need to close the door until it's safe to open. When you hear a single thumping noise, then it's indicative of him leaving, but when you hear 2 thumping noises, then it means that he's swapped places in the vent with another animatronic, which is most likely the hand puppets, as they share the same functionality as Bonnie. Mousekey will make attempts to enter your office via your door. When you see him standing at the door via the light, then you need to close it and wait for him to leave, which is indicated via a squeaking sound effect. Prototype functions in the same way as Foxy from the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. You need to keep a consistent watch of his camera and the face that he's in. When he puts on the Mousekey mask and begins running to your office, then you need to close the door immediately and wait for him to return to his room. Scrapped Fredbear is the only animatronic who, according to the game, doesn't actually want to kill you. He doesn't spawn anywhere specific, but he will make his way to a room with a phone inside to call you and tell you a code which you need to input on the keypad in your office. Inputting this code correctly will deactivate him, but unsuccessfully doing so will result in a jump scare. Fright is the final animatronic who is introduced in the 4th night. When the clock strikes 1 AM, he'll arrive and kill everyone else in the building, including both the phone guy and the animatronics. Then he'll start trying to attack you by entering the vents or going through the door. You need to keep a consistent watch of him through the camera, as that's the only way to know where he's going to be. In addition, knowing where he is at all times is advisable, since he moves extremely quickly. Regardless of your efforts, the 4th night ends with an ambush from Fright, and after completing it, you unlock the 5th and final night of the game. He sees you trapped inside of an animatronic suit, which you need to keep open or else you'll be crushed by the spring locks. While managing this, you need to evade animatronics who will periodically enter the room by seizing all movement when they enter, and you'll also need to fight off hallucinations of Golden Freddy too. I find it worth noting that you can fight off hallucinations from Golden Freddy while animatronics are in the room, as they technically won't see you if you do, which is knowledge worth having, as it makes the night much easier in my opinion. The premise for the night is that you're playing as the phone guy from the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, after he was attacked during his phone call, and now he's trying to stay alive in the animatronics who he's been stuffed inside of, in hopes that someone will find and rescue him before he's crushed by the spring locks. In general, I think that Fredbear's Fright makes an interesting use of its mechanics and animatronics, while keeping the gameplay experience reminiscent of older Five Nights at Freddy's games, yet different enough to be able to stand alongside them as a great game rather than being confined to remaining in their shadow, and as a result of that, I would recommend Fredbear's Fright. The Five Nights at Candy series is one that I've extensively talked about in the past. They're well made, engaging games with a lot of replay value, and I always have fun revisiting them. However, one game that I've ceased to talk about is FNAC Fur, a spin-off action-adventure platformer game about Candy, Cindy, and their quest to pick up Candy's fur balls scattered throughout the area, hence the name of the game. I found the game's more satirical and humorous nature quite charming in comparison to the more serious tone of the mainline entries in the series. As of right now, the only version of FNAC Fur you can play is the legacy demo, which generally seeks to give you a grasp of what the final game will be like. While exploring the map, you can initiate initiate side quests from other characters such as Chester the chimpanzee, who will ask Candy and Cindy to find his red banjo. Tilly the cow will ask them to find her golden bell. Old Candy will ask them to find his lucky coin, and Hilary Hare will ask them to find her electric guitar. The demo gives you the option to initiate these quests but not actually finish them, as to my knowledge, the items can't be found anywhere on the map. In addition, the furballs don't really do anything to contribute to the adventure of the game and just seem to be there. The main aspect of the game that drives you is very much the story, which I thought was worth mentioning. The game also allows you to swap between Candy and Cindy, which doesn't really do anything, aside from a few areas which have items that can only be broken by one of the two characters. For example, Cindy is the only one who can break the wild flowers in the game. With that aside, when exploring Old Candy's house, you find a ball of yarn which is needed to progress to the next area of the game, as Candy and Cindy give it to Beaverson, who repairs a broken bridge and allows them to continue forth. The demo reaches its climax when Candy is confronted by his arch nemesis, the Rat. He tries to initiate an evil plan, gets told off by Cindy, and then comes back to initiate it regardless. He summons an animatronic he made, which Candy and Cindy make quick work of in a boss fight. After this, the Rat leaves Candy and Cindy alone, which gives you the chance to reach the next area of the game where the demo concludes. Despite it being short, I'd recommend trying this demo for yourself if you're interested and want to see what the game was like for yourself. In my experience, it took under 20 minutes to beat, and that was while I was also exploring it in its entirety in hopes of finding everything it had to offer. Bubba's Diner is a game that I vividly remember playing around the time it initially came out. The game does a good job at subverting the general gameplay structure that many have grown accustomed to in fan games, as while it does take place over the course of 5 nights, you're required to play through a series of minigames per night in order to reach its end. You play as Edward Clark, who begins his new job as a handyman at Bubba's Diner. The first night doesn't see you doing much aside from printing documents in the office. In this minigame, you need to print posters while keeping watch of the animatronics known as Bubba and Pork Patch, who make their way to your office as a result of being attracted to the noise. To keep them away, you need to play a music box in one of the cameras and lure them there and away from you. The main strategy I found for this is to just play the music box in the same room continually, which will keep them in the same room, allowing you to finish the minigame without much issue. After beating the night, you enter a post-night cutscene where what is assumed to be a private investigator watches a commercial for the Bubba's Diner restaurant. We'll understand more about this later, so for now we move on to the second night, which introduces a new minigame which involves unclogging the toilet while classical music blasts in the background. Every time you use the plunger, it makes a noise which attracts Bubba to the room, hence you need to periodically check behind you to make sure that he isn't there, as when you see him you need to cease all efforts to unclog the toilet, which will cause him to eventually leave you alone, hence allowing you to continue. There's no real strategy to this minigame, in my opinion. It just requires a lot of patience as there's no real technique to make him go away faster. In addition, you also need to cycle between looking at the toilet and at Bubba when he's there, as the game only shows that he's left when you look at the toilet and look back at the doorway. After completing the night, we see a post-night cutscene from the investigator once more, where he's inspecting revenue data from Bubba's Diner, showing that the restaurant experienced severe financial loss in the 4th month of operating. One thing that I appreciate about the game is that every night in the game introduces something new, which regardless of whether you need to do the previous night's minigame in order to experience that, it does keep the game interesting as you always get to see something new from the game. For example, the 3rd night introduces a new minigame where you need to test Mr. Giggles, an animatronic that was said to have broken down during the day. The minigame gives you 2 minutes to test him by going through all of the voice commands. During his responses, he'll change positions which you need to watch carefully. This is because if he's bending towards you, you need to wait for him to either sit up straight or return to being slouched over, as if you prompt him while he's towards you then he'll jump scare you. In addition, if you don't go through all of the voice commands and complete the minigame in the allocated 2 minutes that you're given, then you'll also get jump scared. The post-night minigame sees the investigator listening to an audio tape left by one of the employees at Bubba's Diner, presumed to be from one named Phillips. We'll learn more about him later, but for now, we enter the 4th night. Night 4 is where more of the game's story slowly begins to unravel. Clark is directly addressed by the phone guy where something about PTSD is mentioned when he's instructed to go into the basement where a thing is kept that seems to have history with Edward. Another aspect of the game that I find myself appreciating is the fact that the game knows when to stop wasting your time. The first 3 nights saw you needing to do the office minigame, which may have gotten stale by that point. Hence, from the 4th night onwards, the game skips that minigame. This sentiment is also repeated with the toilet minigame in the 5th night. The night introduces 2 new minigames. The first one sees you needing to clean party room 1 by sweeping the floors. While doing so, you need to keep watch of the stage in front of you, as when you see an animatronic named Smiley staring behind the curtain, then you need to use your flashlight to send him back behind it. It's worth noting that if you use your flashlight when he's not present, then it'll jump scare you anyway. Entering the basement introduces a minigame where you need to listen out for an animatronic named Bubtrap, who will appear on either side of the room and make a directional sound cue to indicate where he is. When you know what side of the room he's in, then you need to use your flashlight to make him leave. This will then repeat until you're given the chance to leave the room. The post-night cutscene sees the private investigator reading a newspaper that documented the death of an employee in Bubba's Diner, wherein we can see Edward Clark addressed as the former owner of the restaurant. To understand the events of the main 5 nights in the game, it's important to unravel the story of the game and everything that led up to it, which is implied via things like the dialogue from the phone guy, Bubtrap, and the post-night cutscenes that occur in between each night. Edward Clark was the original original owner of Bubba's Diner, where under his supervision an employee named Phillips presumably entered an animatronic suit and died as a result of the spring lock technology. It's likely that Phillips either entered the suit of his own volition or because of Edward's negligence with the dangers behind the continued use of spring lock suits, although it's likely that the latter scenario is most likely true due to Bubtrap's mentioning Edward's failure to heed his calls, which was likely concerning the dangers of the animatronic suit. Either way, Phillips died in the suit, which caused the restaurant to shut down and for everyone to be fired, including Edward, whose role as the owner was later replaced by a man named Michael. While everyone else was fired, Phillips is simply missing from the rotor entirely, which seems to suggest that either his body or soul is still trapped in the animatronic suit. Michael, not knowing what to do with the Bubtrap animatronic, kept it in the basement, likely unaware of the danger that could arise from keeping it within the restaurant. This is likely the note that the game begins on, with Edward returning to the restaurant as a handyman to confront Bubtrap, likely because he's aware of how dangerous Bubtrap is, which is why he continues to venture into the basement despite being given the option not to by the phone guy, and the fact that doing so triggers his PTSD. In the fifth night, Bubtrap attacks him upon entering the basement, although Edward is able to save himself from this encounter by using a shotgun that was coincidentally knocked over to shoot Bubtrap and escape the restaurant. The game ends with the private investigator finally understanding Edward's role in the incident surrounding Bubba's Diner, hence ending the game. This current ending in the game isn't the original one, which was removed from the game upon its initial release due to limitations with Click Team Fusion, which is the game's engine. The original ending saw Edward needing to then defend himself from the other animatronics such as Mr. Giggles, Smiley and Bubba, who are drawn to him by the sound of the shotgun, before ending with Edward reading a newspaper documenting his actions at the restaurant. Oddly enough, Porkpatch is the only animatronic who doesn't get shot in this ending, and there are still likely remnants of this ending in the current version of the game, as after shooting Bubtrap, the sound of the gun shooting is played a few times, which is likely Edward shooting the other animatronics or him shooting Bubtrap multiple times. I don't have a particular opinion on which ending was better. The original one was more action-packed as Edward goes on a rampage throughout the restaurant, whereas the updated one is more clear about the post-night cutscenes and that they were through the perspective of an investigator, which to my knowledge was never conveyed in the original ending. One does a better job at bringing the story together in a more coherent way, and the other does a better job at giving a more action-oriented set piece to end an otherwise atmospheric game. In general, I think that Bubba's Diner does a good job at subverting the general structure of many Five Nights at Freddy's fan games while simultaneously telling an interesting story, and as a result I would highly recommend it. There exist many Five Nights at Freddy's fan games which provide an entertaining and engaging experience to those who seek them out. I haven't been invested in a lot of what this aspect of Five Nights at Freddy's has to offer, but the experiences that I've indulged in are the ones that I would recommend. I think that some of them have issues concerning things like the dialogue and whatnot, but other than that, I think that these games are worth experiencing for yourself. So, there's the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. This video has been hectic to record, but alas, here we are. If you want to view the list of games I want to make videos about in the future, then you can always do so through the link in the description. Additionally, if you want to follow me, then my socials will be linked in the description, as well as any afterthoughts or messages I may want to add. With that, I haven't really got much else I want to say, so I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.